Since the pandemic, we are made acutely aware of the presence of hospitals as a battlefield where life and death run side by side. But even in the best of times, hospitals are where human frailty and suffering most clearly manifest, along with human ingenuity, incredible will to live and help others. It is no wonder so many mysterious stories are born in hospitals. But in Korea, they often have added layer, as many major hospitals there also run funeral home department, and most contemporary Koreans would die in a hospital and have the last ritual of departure there too. Talking about funerals, I discussed about the funeral culture in Korea in one of the past episodes. I'm leaving the link at the corner of the screen if you are interested. So, I collected various accounts from hospitals told by a doctor, nurses, staff, and patients, ranging from spooky, plain weird, to heart-wrenching. Here are 5 allegedly true stories from Korea about hospitals. As always, handpicked, translated, and narrated by your host, Anthony. It's from the time when I was on the vocational course for nursing. The course was paid off by my scholarship, but I still had to earn other expenses. So whenever there was an occasion that they needed a nursing assistant, I applied before anybody else. The vacancy was usually for the night shift and at the hospital where we took our practice lessons anyway, so I just took it as an extension of my daytime lessons. During the period of the practice lessons, I got somewhat acquainted with a patient, an old lady in her 70s. I say somewhat because she was suffering Alzheimer's on top of her health condition and didn't seem to exactly understand who I was and why I was there. She would call me by the name of her granddaughter, hold my hand or pat on my head with a smile while I washed her. At first, I didn't know how to react being a student nurse, but soon I just decided to embrace it as it was. The big operation day for the old lady came. Despite of her Alzheimer, she seemed to understand what she was about to go through, and she held on my hand with a nerve's eyes. I just tried to calm and encourage her and accompanied it to the door of the operation theater. But she still wouldn't let go of my hand. In the end, the doctor in charge asked the old lady if she'd let go of my hand if I was allowed into the operation room. Only then she dropped my hand with a big smile. So I had to hurriedly change into the operation suit. The operation that was planned to wrap up in 4 hours turned out dragging on for 11 hours. And because it was the first time for me to observe such a major operation, the long hours were torturous for me. And all the while, the old lady was holding my hand with a strength unbelievable for a woman of her age and under general anesthesia. At the end of it, my fingers turned almost blue. When the operation was finally finished, I could get freed from the lady's grip only with other nurses' help. I was knackered, but had to start straight away with my night shift as the nursing assistant. Other nurses, upon learning what happened to me, brought me some snacks and coffee, which helped me to get through the night. Towards the end of the shift, I went to check on the old lady. She was awake. Normally I could only make sense of about half of what she should say, but that morning she was calm and lucid. She told me she knew I wasn't her granddaughter, knew my real name from my name tag. And she thanked me for keeping her side through the operation, that it helped her immensely. I told her she should try and take some more rest, and we should get out to the hospital park together to get some fresh air when she would recover enough. Before I left her room, she once again said, "Thank you," with a beautiful smile. Back home, I fell asleep right away after a real long day and had a dream. The old lady was about to fall off from the rooftop of the hospital building, and I managed to catch her hand just in time. At first I thought I should be able to rescue her up, but soon realized there were numerous people hanging on and dragging down the feet of the lady, creating a hellish scene. The old lady struggled, crying out, "I don't want to die! I don't want to die!" My arm stretched to the limit for all the weight, and I thought I could not hold on any more. But I feared to lose the old lady, and at last managed to pull her up. The next moment, all the people who were holding on to her were gone, and down there was just a void of darkness. I got scared and hurried myself to back inside, when I heard, in the wind passing through my ear, voices of people saying, "That shall be in vain." I woke up drenched in cold sweat. To wash it off, I jumped into the shower, and then I noticed a dark bruise on my wrist, as if somebody grabbed onto it for a dear life. I was now worried about the old lady and hurried myself to the hospital. The nurse in charge informed me that there was a moment she seemed losing it in the early hours of the morning, but fortunately recovered again. I was relieved but shuddered at the same time, remembering the voices from my dream. What would have happened if I had let her go in the dream? It may not be so scary a story, but it still remains a mystery for me. Back in 1992, I was 8 years old. At the time, tonsillitis was very common among kids and youngsters. I had it pretty bad and had to have my tonsils surgically removed. The hospital I was operated in was a famous one in Busan run by a Christian organization. Before the operation, I had to go through various tests up and down the hospital, and on that day, I was coming down from the electrocardiogram at the top floor of the building. In the elevator were my mom, who was carrying the drip attached to me, 2 nurses, and 2 other patients. The elevator then stopped at the 4th floor, and the door opened, revealing the floor in total blackout, as if the whole floor was out of use. The only light was from the bottom gap of the door to the room right opposite the elevator. But nobody in the elevator seemed to notice or think anything was amiss, when the whole floor was in dark in this big general hospital, and in the daytime too. When my eyes got a bit used to the darkness, I saw dark figures resembling people floating around. I asked Mom, as a simple-minded child would, "Is this floor for dead people only?" But the nurse pushed the close button, and I could not observe any more. And that's all. But I still look back on the day and fail to come up with any rational explanation. How could a whole floor left in darkness in such a large, busy hospital? Not to mention, most hotels and hospitals in Korea would avoid to mark the 4th floor, as the number 4 has the same sound as the word death. And what were those shadow people I saw in the dark? What was going on the 4th floor of the hospital? My friend is a nurse of 8 years of experience, mainly in the emergency department. One can't avoid seeing all sorts of terrible scenes and damaged bodies working in ER, and it testifies her strong mentality in itself that she has worked there for 8 long years. When she first started in ER, she overheard senior nurses talking about the ghost in the emergency room. In this ER, there were 13 beds, number 1 from the entrance to the number 13 at the end of the room. They would feel from the bed number 1 and would try not to use bed number 13 unless there was no other option, because people often saw a ghost around the 13th bed, a ghost of a young boy. My friends just laughed at first, thinking the senior nurses were making fun of her for being a newbie. But she quickly noticed many patients talking about having seen a young boy on number 13 bed. As it was ER, patients didn't stay there long, and there was no possibility that they all could have heard of the rumor about the ghost. My friend could not help but taking the rumor more seriously gradually. Apparently the ghost must have looked like a real boy, and patients would ask nurses questions like, "What's wrong with the little boy on that bed at the end?" Or, "Where's the parents of the boy on the last bed?" Or, "Why is such a young kid left all alone? Shouldn't somebody attend him?" Clearly not noticing the boy wasn't human. And this happened a few days ago. Because the 13th bed was usually left empty, nurses often put various supplies and equipment on it temporarily. My friend was putting such things on the bed in order when a patient lying on the bed behind her asked, "Nurse, who is that boy who's been following you around, holding your hand?" My friend, a hardened ER nurse of 8 years of experience, dropped everything and screamed out of the ward. Who is that boy, and what's holding him there all those years? After graduating my uni, I had a temporary job at the university hospital back in my hometown. Apparently the hospital was going in the red for a few years, and the 30-year-old hospital building was well overdue with the necessary renovation and maintenance. I was a part of the facility management team, so I was called in from left, right and center in need of urgent fix and tinkerings. One summer night, I came by the nurse's office for one such a call and stayed there a while after the job was done to chatter with some nurses. Then I felt a call of nature and was walking towards the man's room on the floor. An old man popped out of the toilet and blocked my way. He then, quite out of blue, started scolding me that the facility was awful, that the management was neglecting the duty. Wasn't I the one in charge? I was supposed to do my job. Well, he was obviously a patient there, so I just said I was sorry and I would try better, but he still wouldn't let me go and just repeated the same complaints. In the end, I got a bit upset myself, and to escape the situation, I just apologized again and turned around to go to the toilet downstairs instead. When I reached about the staircase, suddenly a thundering noise came from the toilet. I ran back there to find the whole ceiling had collapsed down in the men's room. I thought of the old man and jumped into the rubble and dust to see if he wasn't under the debris. Fortunately, nobody was there. I called my boss in the facility management and hung around there waiting for other guys. Then the lift door opened and saw a staff from the funeral house getting off. He walked into one of the wards and rolled out an old man who had just passed away. I froze there to find it was the very old man who had scolded me in front of the collapsed toilet. I asked the staff, and he informed me that he passed apparently an hour or so ago, and he came in to take him down as soon as the death certificate was approved. But I saw him and talked with him less than a quarter of an hour ago. Next morning, I came by his funeral to say thanks to him for saving me from the accident. "5 years ago, I was still an intern doctor working at a hospital in Jinju City. One day, a 26-year-old young man was brought into the emergency room. He fell from the construction site he was working on and suffered severe damage to his head. Despite all the revival effort, it was clear that there was no chance for him to survive. And as if to confirm my grim prediction, his cardiogram switched from the normal rhythm to a wave pattern, what we call VTAC. It was a sure sign of impending death. I never saw a patient on VTAC surviving longer than 10 minutes. I informed his family, who were waiting outside the emergency room, that they should come in and bid him goodbye. Those who seemed to be his parents and some other relatives cried and lamented looking at the young man's unconscious and lifeless body. But even they all seemed to have accepted the terrible reality that he wouldn't survive. I instructed nurses to contact the funeral department as soon as his heart should stop, and moved on to tend other patients. About an hour later, I was surprised to find the young man still lying there, unconscious, but his cardiogram still carrying on with that slow wave. Something I had never seen. But with new patients constantly rolling in, I could not pay much more attention to him for the rest of the night. In the morning, despite the exhaustion, I could not brush off the thought of the young man. My reason fully expected an empty bed or another patient there by then. But I could not deny I had a kind of strange hope at one corner of my heart. And I was shocked to find him still there, his weak, wavy heartbeat carrying on. His body was nearly dead, but his spirit seemed to be hanging on, as if waiting for something he could not possibly leave behind easily. It was something I could not explain in medical or scientific sense, so my mind instinctively expected something beyond the rational reason. Almost 2 days passed, and he was still holding on. And then a young woman walked into the intensive care unit, the face I didn't see among the family members 2 days prior. Clearly arrived in a rush, she walked towards the patient with a pale face, not even daring to look at the damaged face of the young man. And the moment she reached his bed, his cardiogram finally stopped, the slow wave dying into a straight line. I was awash with indescribable emotions and had to leave the room. She was the one he'd been waiting for, fighting all the rational expectations. I learned the woman was his young bride, carrying their 3-month-old baby in her. I had to tell her how her husband had been hanging on to his life, waiting for her and their baby. Even though he could not say it in words, that must have been his way to bid his last love and goodbye to them. Doctor is a hard job, and often has to play an almost inhumane role between life and death. But this experience has made me believe in something beyond cold hard facts, and above all, the power of love that leads us all. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for your listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. My mom used to say, even though doctors and lawyers are highly regarded as professions, it is still the best as an individual not to get a reason to go to a hospital or court. Fortunately, I haven't had a reason to be in one of them for any extended period of time so far. But from my visits to family members and friends who were hospitalized, I must say I have a great respect for medical staffs for, if nothing else, that they managed to survive in those environments. Let us all stay healthy and stay well away from hospitals, I hope. If you liked my work, why don't you leave it a thumbs up and a little comment? Your subscription to my channel would be even better. It's free and you'll be updated with my weekly new videos too. Until the next, stay safe and take care.